In 1962, the Pentagon planned to kill American civilians and blame Cuba. The plans were ready. The targets were selected. Only one man's signature was missing, President Kennedy's, and Kennedy said no. But what if he had said yes? Welcome to Classified Hidden Histories, where we uncover the secrets they never wanted you to know. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the most shocking betrayal in American government history, the story of Operation Northwoods, and how America's military leaders planned to murder their own people. The year is 1961. President John F. Kennedy sits in the Oval Office, reviewing the aftermath of one of the greatest military disasters in American history, the Bay of Pigs invasion. The CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro has failed spectacularly, leaving Kennedy humiliated and Castro stronger than ever. 90 miles off the coast of Florida, the communist dictator is building a Soviet-aligned fortress in America's backyard. The military establishment is furious. They want Castro gone, and they're running out of patience with Kennedy's reluctance to use overwhelming force. The Bay of Pigs failure has created a credibility crisis for the new president. Military leaders openly question his resolve. CIA officials suggest he lacks the stomach for real warfare. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara pressures him daily for more aggressive action against Cuba. But Kennedy is cautious. He knows that a direct military invasion of Cuba could trigger World War III with the Soviet Union. Nuclear weapons are no longer theoretical. They're real, and any miscalculation could end human civilization. The president needs a solution that removes Castro without starting a global nuclear war. The military brass has a different perspective. Led by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer, they believe Kennedy is weak and indecisive. In their view, Castro represents an existential threat to American security that requires immediate military action. General Lemnitzer is a World War II veteran who helped plan D-Day and believes in decisive military action. To him, Kennedy is a young politician who doesn't understand the realities of warfare. The general thinks America needs a real reason to invade Cuba, something so compelling that even cautious politicians like Kennedy would have no choice but to act. In the Pentagon's secure conference rooms, a group of military planners begins developing what they call pretexts for military intervention in Cuba. Their goal is simple: create a justification for full-scale invasion that the American people will support. The planning team includes some of the military's brightest minds. They study successful military deceptions from World War II, analyze propaganda techniques, and examine historical pretexts for war. Their research leads them to a disturbing conclusion. The most effective way to generate public support for war is to make Americans feel personally threatened. The planners realize that abstract geopolitical concerns won't motivate the American public. People don't care about communist ideology or Soviet missile bases, but they do care about dead Americans. If Cuban agents were to attack American civilians, public outrage would demand immediate military retaliation. The problem is that Cuba shows no interest in attacking American civilians. Castro is focused on consolidating power at home, not provoking a superpower that could destroy his regime in days. The Cuban military is defensive, not aggressive. Cuban intelligence services are primitive compared to the CIA and pose no serious threat to American security. So the Pentagon planners reach a logical conclusion. If Cuba won't attack Americans, America will have to attack Americans and blame Cuba for it. The concept they develop is called a false flag operation, conducting attacks under enemy colors to justify military retaliation. The historical precedent is strong. The Germans used false flag attacks to justify invading Poland. The Japanese used fabricated incidents to justify expanding into China. Now American military planners want to use the same tactics against their own people. The Pentagon's false flag proposals are breathtaking in their scope and cynicism. The planners don't just want to stage a few minor incidents. They want to orchestrate a comprehensive campaign of terror against American civilians. The first set of proposals targets Cuban exile communities in Miami. Military operatives would conduct bomb attacks against Cuban refugee centers, then blame Castro's agents. The attacks would be designed to kill and maim innocent refugees, creating powerful images of Cuban brutality that American television networks would broadcast into every living room. The second set of proposals targets American military personnel. Pentagon planners suggest sinking a U.S. Navy ship and killing its crew, then claiming Cuban forces were responsible. They propose shooting down American military aircraft over international waters and blaming Cuban air defenses. They even suggest staging fake funerals for fictional American casualties to increase emotional impact. The third set of proposals is the most audacious: direct attacks on American civilians within the United States. Military planners propose conducting terrorist bombings in American cities, particularly Washington, D.C. and Miami. They suggest hijacking American commercial aircraft and either shooting them down or crashing them into prominent buildings. The planners envision a coordinated campaign lasting several weeks. Each attack would be more dramatic than the last, building public outrage to the point where invasion becomes inevitable. News reports would describe Cuban brutality. Refugee testimonials would detail Castro's cruelty, and government officials would reluctantly conclude that military action is America's only option. To make the deception convincing, Pentagon planners propose creating fake evidence of Cuban involvement. They would plant Cuban weapons at attack sites, forge documents linking the attacks to Havana, and recruit Cuban exiles to provide false testimony about Castro's terrorist network. On March 13, 1962, General Lyman Lemnitzer walks into Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara's office carrying a top-secret document. The file is stamped "Eyes Only" and contains the Pentagon's formal proposals for false flag operations against American civilians. The document is titled "Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba" and bears the official seal of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It represents the consensus view of America's highest-ranking military officers that killing American civilians is an acceptable price for removing Fidel Castro from power. McNamara reads the document with growing alarm. The proposals are detailed, specific, and clearly designed for immediate implementation. This isn't theoretical planning or academic exercise. This is a serious military proposal with operational timelines and resource requirements. The document includes cost estimates for various attacks, casualty projections for different scenarios, and propaganda strategies for maximum public impact. Pentagon planners have thought through every detail, from which American cities to target to how many civilians need to die for maximum emotional effect. Most disturbing is the document's clinical tone. The planners discuss killing American civilians with the same detachment they might use to plan a bridge construction project. There's no moral agonizing, no discussion of ethical implications, no acknowledgement that they're proposing to murder innocent people. McNamara realizes he's holding evidence of a planned military coup against American democracy. If the Pentagon is willing to kill civilians to justify war, what other extreme measures might they consider acceptable? How far are military leaders willing to go to override civilian authority? The Operation Northwoods proposal reaches President Kennedy's desk on March the 16th, 1962. He reads it alone in the Oval Office without advisors or staff present. The weight of the moment is overwhelming. America's military leadership is asking him to authorize the murder of American civilians. Kennedy understands the implications immediately. Approving Operation Northwoods would make him complicit in mass murder. It would violate every principle of democratic governance and constitutional law. It would transform him from president into dictator, using state power to kill innocent people for political purposes. But Kennedy also understands the pressure he's under. The military establishment considers him weak and inexperienced. Congressional hawks are demanding aggressive action against Cuba. Public opinion polls show growing frustration with his cautious approach to communist threats. The president spends hours reviewing the Pentagon's proposals, trying to understand how America's military leaders could recommend such actions. These are men he's supposed to trust with national security, experienced officers who swore oaths to protect the Constitution. Yet they're asking him to authorize terrorism against his own people. Kennedy's decision comes quickly. He rejects Operation Northwoods immediately and completely. There'll be no false flag attacks, no murdered civilians, no fabricated pretexts for war. The president makes clear that such proposals should never reach his desk again. But Kennedy's rejection of Operation Northwoods has consequences. His relationship with the military establishment deteriorates rapidly. General Lemnitzer is quietly reassigned to NATO command in Europe. Other Pentagon officials who supported the false flag proposals find their access to the president severely limited. Operation Northwoods remains classified for decades after Kennedy's rejection. The American public knows nothing about their military's plan to kill them. The proposals are buried in Pentagon archives, marked top secret, and forgotten by all but a few insiders. Kennedy's presidency continues for another year and a half before his assassination in Dallas on November 22, 1963. Some researchers later suggest connections between his rejection of Operation Northwoods and his death, though no definitive evidence of such links has ever been established. The Cuban Missile Crisis occurs just months after Kennedy rejects the false flag proposals. The president's handling of that crisis demonstrates the wisdom of his cautious approach. Nuclear war is avoided through diplomacy rather than military action. Castro remains in power, but the world doesn't end. General Lemnitzer and other Operation Northwoods supporters continue their military careers without facing consequences for proposing to murder civilians. The culture that produced such proposals remains intact within the Pentagon, though future false flag suggestions are made more carefully. The Operation Northwoods documents are finally declassified in the 1990s, more than 30 years after they were written. The revelation shocks historians and researchers who had never imagined that American military leaders would formally propose killing their own people. The Operation Northwoods documents force us to confront uncomfortable truths about American government and military culture. How could the nation's highest-ranking military officers propose murdering innocent civilians? What does this say about the military mindset during the Cold War era? The proposals reveal the extent to which some military leaders were willing to go to achieve their strategic objectives. In their minds, removing Castro justified any means necessary, including terrorism against American citizens. The ends justified the means, no matter how horrific those means might be. Kennedy's rejection of Operation Northwoods represents one of the most important presidential decisions in American history. By refusing to authorize false flag attacks, he prevented a fundamental transformation of American government from democracy to military dictatorship. But the fact that such proposals reached the president's desk at all demonstrates how close America came to crossing a line from which there might have been no return. If Kennedy had approved Operation Northwoods, the United States would have become a terrorist state, using murder and deception to manipulate its own people. The declassified documents also raise questions about other mysterious events in American history. If military leaders were willing to propose false flag attacks in 1962, what about other incidents that might have served similar purposes? How many apparent enemy attacks might actually have been self-inflicted wounds designed to justify military action? Operation Northwoods reminds us that democratic institutions are fragile and require constant vigilance to protect. Military leaders who swear oaths to defend the Constitution can still propose actions that would destroy constitutional government. Civilian control of the military isn't just a political theory. It's a practical necessity for preventing military coups and protecting democratic values. The next time you hear government officials claim that national security requires extreme measures, remember Operation Northwoods. Remember that America's military leaders once proposed killing innocent civilians to justify a war they wanted to fight. Remember that the line between protecting democracy and destroying it can be crossed with a single signature on a classified document. President Kennedy's refusal to sign that document may have saved American democracy from its own military establishment. The truth about Operation Northwoods doesn't prove that every government action is a conspiracy, or that every military operation is a false flag. But it does prove that such things are possible, that they have been seriously considered, and that only civilian oversight prevents them from happening. This is Classified Hidden Histories, where we uncover the secrets they never wanted you to know, because understanding what our government has considered doing helps us understand what they might consider doing in the future. The Operation Northwoods documents are available for public review at the National Archives. Every American should read them, not to promote paranoia or distrust, but to understand the importance of maintaining democratic control over military power. In the end, Operation Northwoods is a story about the price of democracy and the vigilance required to maintain it. Kennedy paid that price by standing up to his own military establishment. The question for every generation is whether they'll have leaders with the courage to do the same.